They rejected you, made it clear through words or actions or patterns that they couldn't give you what you needed, that the relationship wasn't working for them, that they needed space or freedom or whatever language their defensive system used to communicate that being with you was too much vulnerability, too much intimacy, too much requirement to show up consistently in ways their wounds wouldn't allow. The rejection might have been explicit, clear ending, definitive conversation, unambiguous statement that they were done. Or it might have been implicit, withdrawal so complete that the relationship ended through absence rather than through declaration, patterns so destructive that continuation became impossible, emotional unavailability so profound that you finally accepted the relationship was over, even if they never officially ended it. Either way, they rejected you. They chose their defended position over partnership with you. They prioritized their comfort over your legitimate needs. They demonstrated through rejection that maintaining their protective distance mattered more than keeping you. And in that moment of rejection, whether they announced it clearly or created conditions that made it inevitable, they expected specific response from you. They expected pursuit, expected you to fight for the relationship, expected you to express pain or anger or desperation that would confirm you still wanted them despite the rejection, expected you to try to change their mind, to prove your worth, to demonstrate that you couldn't live without them. Or at minimum, they expected ongoing contact, explanations about why you're hurt, questions about what went wrong, attempts to maintain friendship, some continued connection that would keep you in their orbit even if the relationship had ended. The rejection was supposed to create dramatic response that would validate their significance while maintaining their control. What they didn't expect, what they weren't prepared for, what their defensive system had no strategy to manage, was your complete silence. You didn't pursue, didn't fight, didn't beg, didn't explain your pain in messages they could read and feel significant about while not actually having to address the pain. Didn't try to convince them, didn't attempt to stay friends, didn't maintain any connection that would allow them to keep tabs on you or to know they still mattered to you. Despite rejecting you, you just went silent, completely, utterly, permanently silent. And that silence, that absolute withdrawal of your voice, your energy, your presence from their life, has destroyed them in ways the rejection was never supposed to create. Because the rejection was supposed to restore their defended position while keeping you available in some form, was supposed to eliminate the pressure of relationship while maintaining the validation your attention provided, was supposed to give them the independence they claimed to need while confirming through your response that they were still significant to you. But your silence eliminated all of that. Your silence communicated something their defensive system cannot process. You accepted the rejection completely, moved on entirely, withdrew all investment so thoroughly that they no longer exist in your world in any form. And this absolute absence of you, this silence that continues day after day, week after week, with no sign of ending, is destroying them because it's forcing them to experience the full consequence of their rejection without any buffer, without any confirmation that they still matter to you, without any evidence that the relationship meant what they, somewhere deep inside, know it meant. The silence is more devastating than any expression of pain would have been, because pain would have meant you still cared. Silence means you don't, and not caring, being genuinely indifferent, being absent, being done, is the one response their ego cannot tolerate, and their defensive system has no strategy to manage. Why your silence is more devastating to them than any expression of pain or anger would have been. The avoidance defensive system is calibrated to manage specific responses to their rejection: pursuit, pain, Anger attempts to restore connection, but silence represents something their system cannot process or defend against effectively. Your pain would have validated that they mattered and that rejecting you had impact. But silence suggests they're so irrelevant that their rejection didn't even warrant emotional response. If you'd expressed pain through messages, through mutual friends, through any communication that revealed you were hurt by the rejection, the avoidant would have felt significant. Your pain would have proved that they mattered to you, that the relationship was important, that losing them created impact. Even negative impact confirms significance. Even pain proves they affected you. The defensive system can process this, can use your pain as validation while maintaining defended position. They matter enough to hurt you, which confirms their ego's need to feel significant, without requiring them to actually be vulnerable or present. Your pain serves them, but your silence serves nothing in them. Silence doesn't validate significance. Silence doesn't prove impact. Silence suggests that their rejection was so inconsequential that you didn't even bother to express pain about it, that they matter so little that you couldn't be bothered to respond, that the relationship meant so little that its ending required no emotional processing with them. The silence implies they're irrelevant, and irrelevance is what the ego cannot tolerate. Your pain would have been manageable. Your silence is destroying them because it denies them the significance they need. Your anger would have shown you still cared enough to be emotionally engaged, but silence communicates complete indifference that's more threatening to their ego than any negative emotion. Similarly, if you'd expressed anger, told them off, explained how they failed you, expressed rage about their patterns, the avoidant would have confirmation that you're still emotionally engaged with them. Anger is a form of caring. You don't get angry at people who don't matter to you. Anger means they affected you enough to generate strong emotional response. The defensive system can handle this, can deflect the anger, can tell themselves you're overreacting, can use the anger as evidence that you were too emotional anyway. Anger serves their defensive narrative while confirming their significance. But silence contains no anger. Silence is the opposite of emotional engagement. Silence communicates that you're so completely done that you don't even have anger left, that they're not worth the energy anger requires, that you've moved past them so completely that generating emotional response to them feels unnecessary. Silence is indifference, and indifference means they don't matter. The ego needs to matter, even negatively. Your anger would have confirmed they matter. Your silence denies it, and denial of mattering is more threatening than any amount of anger, because anger at least proves you're still oriented toward them emotionally. Silence proves you're not oriented toward them at all. Pursuit would have confirmed they still had power over you, but silence demonstrates they have zero power and zero access, which strips away the control their defensive system depends on. If you'd pursued after the rejection, tried to get them back, asked for another chance, worked to convince them to reconsider, the avoidant would have felt powerful, would have confirmation that they control the dynamic, that they're the one being pursued, that they have the power to accept or reject your pursuit. This power is what makes the avoidant feel safe. If they have power, they control outcomes, and if they control outcomes, they cannot be hurt. Your pursuit would have maintained their sense of power, but your silence demonstrates complete absence of their power over you. They cannot make you pursue, because you're not pursuing. They cannot control whether you contact them, because you're not contacting them. They have zero access to you and zero ability to affect you. The silence proves they don't have power they thought they had, cannot control outcomes they thought they controlled, cannot manage the dynamic because there is no dynamic. You've withdrawn from it entirely. This stripping away of power creates profound destabilization because the avoidance sense of safety comes from feeling in control. Your silence proves they're not in control of anything concerning you. This powerlessness is devastating. Your attempts to understand or get closure would have kept you engaged with them, but silence means you don't need anything from them, not even explanations or understanding. If you'd sought closure, asked why the relationship ended, tried to understand what went wrong, requested final conversation to gain understanding, the avoidant would still have your engagement. You'd still be oriented toward them, still needing something from them, explanations, still in some form of relationship where they're relevant to your process. The defensive system can work with this, can provide minimal explanations that keep you engaged, can use your need for closure as ongoing connection, but your silence means you need nothing from them. No explanations, no closure, no final conversation, no understanding. You've moved forward without any of the things people usually need from endings. This suggests you've processed the relationship completely without their participation, have found your own closure without their input, don't require their perspective to understand what happened. Your not needing anything from them means they're completely irrelevant to your healing and your growth. And this irrelevance, this demonstration that you can process loss of them without their participation, is more devastating than any need for closure would have been, because need would have kept you connected in some form. Lack of need means complete disconnection. The silence creates void where they expected dramatic response, and the void is forcing them to feel the full weight of what they rejected without any buffering validation. The avoidant rejected you expecting drama, expecting response, expecting engagement of some kind, positive or negative, but engagement nonetheless. They were prepared to handle whatever response came, but silence isn't a response they can handle. It's absence of response, absence of engagement, absence of you. And in that absence, that void where your response should have been, they're confronting something their defensive system cannot buffer them from, the full weight of what they rejected. Without your pain to focus on, without your anger to deflect, without your pursuit to manage, without your need for closure to engage with, there's nothing between them and the reality of what they've lost. They sit with the rejection they initiated and the silence that followed, and in that silence is forced recognition. They rejected something valuable, and you accepted the rejection so completely that you're not even bothering to make them feel the impact. The void the silence creates is filled only with their own recognition of what they destroyed, with no validation or distraction to make that recognition more bearable. And sitting with that unmediated recognition of loss is destroying them in ways your dramatic response never could have, because dramatic response would have given them something to focus on other than their own choice and its permanent consequences. The specific ways your silence is forcing them to confront what they rejected and what they lost. Your silence isn't passive. It's active force that's systematically dismantling the defensive narratives the avoidant built around the rejection. Understanding what your silence is doing to them helps you see its power. The silence eliminates their ability to blame you for the ending. Without your emotional response to point to as evidence you were too much, they're left with their own patterns as the clear cause. During and after relationships, avoidants typically build narrative where their partner's behavior justified the ending. She was too needy, too demanding, too emotional. This narrative protects them from having to acknowledge their own patterns as the problem. But your silence eliminates the evidence they'd use to build that narrative. You're not being needy. You're completely independent, moving forward without them. You're not being demanding. You're demanding nothing, not even explanation. You're not being too emotional. You're demonstrating perfect emotional control through your complete absence. With no negative behavior from you to point to as justification, They're left confronting the reality that their patterns, their emotional unavailability, their withdrawal, their inability to sustain intimacy are what ended the relationship. The silence forces them to see their own responsibility because you're not giving them any material to construct defensive narrative where you're the problem. Your silence is mirror, reflecting only their own patterns back at them, with nothing of yours to use as distraction or justification. Without your presence to take for granted, they're experiencing the actual absence of everything you provided: support, understanding, consistency, care, in ways they never appreciated while receiving it. While you were present, they took you for granted. Your support, your understanding, your consistency, your care, all of it was invisible to them because it was constant. They couldn't see what you provided because it was always there, but your silence has removed all of it. Now they're experiencing life without your support, without your understanding when they're struggling, without your consistency they could always count on, without your care about how their day went or what they're dealing with. The absence of all these things is making them visible for the first time. They're cataloging what's missing. No one checks on them. No one understands them without extensive explanation. No one provides the specific kind of support you provided. No one creates the safety you created. The silence isn't just absence of contact. It's absence of everything you were doing for them that they failed to recognize as valuable while receiving it. And experiencing the absence is teaching them what they had through making them feel what they don't have anymore. This education through absence is more powerful than any words about their taking you for granted would have been. The silence is proving that you can thrive without them, which destroys their unconscious assumption that you needed them more than they needed you. The avoidant maintained assumption that you needed them more, that you were more dependent, more invested, more attached. This assumption was part of their power position. They mattered more to you than you mattered to them, which meant they were safer because they had less to lose. But your silence is destroying this assumption through demonstrating that you're fine without them, better than fine, thriving without them. The silence proves you didn't need them the way they assumed you did. Proves you can build life, can move forward, can be happy without their presence. And if you can thrive without them, maybe you never needed them in the ways their ego wanted to believe you did. Maybe they mattered less to you than they thought. Maybe the power position they assumed they held was illusion. This realization is devastating because it inverts the relationship hierarchy they depended on. They rejected you believing you'd suffer more from the rejection. Your thriving proves they may be the one suffering more. Your silence demonstrates they may have needed you more than you needed them. This inversion destroys the power dynamic their defensive system relied on. Your complete absence is making them realize you've moved forward entirely, creating panic that they're being left behind in ways they've never experienced. The avoidant is accustomed to being the one who moves on, the one who's fine after endings, the one who leaves others behind. But your silence suggests complete role reversal. You're the one who's moved on. You're the one who's fine. You're the one who's building new life without looking back. They're the one stuck thinking about you. They're the one who can't move forward. They're the one being left behind. This experience is novel and deeply uncomfortable because it contradicts their self-concept as the independent one who's unaffected by relationship endings. They should be the one moving on easily. You should be the one stuck. But reality is inverted, and the panic this creates is profound because being left behind activates abandonment wounds. Their entire defensive structure was built to protect against. They're experiencing what they've made others experience. The feeling of being the one who's left, the one who lost more, the one watching someone else move forward while they're stuck. And experiencing this from the other side is destroying them because it's the exact position their defenses were supposed to ensure they never occupied. The silence is removing all feedback about whether you still care, creating unbearable uncertainty that their defensive system cannot tolerate. The avoidant needs to know they matter, needs confirmation that you still care even if relationship is over, needs some sign that they're significant in your life in some form, but your silence provides zero feedback. They have no idea if you still care or if you're completely indifferent. No idea if you think about them or never think about them. No idea if you miss them or are relieved they're gone. The uncertainty is unbearable because the defensive system depends on knowing where people stand. If they know you still care, they can maintain distance while feeling secure. If they know you don't care, they can adjust their stance, but they don't know. Your silence provides no information, and not knowing whether they matter to you at all is more tormenting than either knowing you still care or knowing you don't care, because the uncertainty prevents them from settling into any defensive position. They're stuck in limbo, where they cannot confirm significance or accept insignificance. They're suspended in not knowing that creates constant anxiety. The defensive system has no strategy to resolve. The silence is torture, specifically because it provides no data they can use to restore their sense of control or their sense of significance. Why the destruction your silence creates is actually the natural consequence they deserve to experience. The avoidance devastation from your silence isn't cruel punishment you're inflicting. It's natural consequence of patterns they chose and rejection they initiated. Understanding this helps you maintain your silence without guilt. They rejected you expecting to maintain benefits of your presence through your continued emotional engagement. The silence is simply removing benefits they weren't entitled to after choosing to end the relationship. The avoidant wanted both, wanted to reject the relationship because it required too much vulnerability, but also wanted to keep you emotionally engaged because your engagement provided validation and confirmed significance. This is having it both ways. Ending relationship, but maintaining benefits of your emotional investment and attention. Your silence simply enforces natural boundary. If relationship is over, all benefits of the relationship are over too. This isn't punishment. This is natural consequence. They chose to end relationship through explicit rejection or through patterns that made ending inevitable. The natural result is that you're no longer in their life in any capacity. The silence is just enforcement of the boundary their rejection created. They don't get to reject you and keep your emotional engagement. They don't get to end relationship and maintain your attention. They made choice. Your silence is the consequence of their choice. This is justice, not cruelty. The devastation they're experiencing is what you experienced during the relationship. They're finally feeling what their patterns created for you, which is appropriate education about impact of their behavior. During relationship, you experience what they're experiencing now, the feeling of being emotionally abandoned, the pain of someone's absence, the devastation of investing in someone who withdraws, the silence and distance that creates unbearable uncertainty. They put you through this repeatedly, through their patterns, withdrawal, unavailability, hot-cold cycles, emotional distance that felt like being with someone who wasn't really there. You experienced devastation from their emotional absence, while they were protected from experiencing consequence of creating that absence. Now, they're experiencing it. They're feeling what their absence created for you. They're living in the silence they subjected you to. This is education through experience. They couldn't understand what their patterns did to you when you explained with words. Now they're understanding through experiencing the mirror version, your silence, showing them what their emotional silence felt like to you. This isn't revenge. This is them finally experiencing the natural result of behavior they normalized throughout relationship. The learning that should have happened through your communication is happening through your absence. Your silence is enforcing boundary you should have enforced earlier, teaching them that their patterns have permanent consequences rather than being endlessly tolerable. Throughout relationship, you absorbed consequence of their patterns. When they withdrew, you pursued. When they were unavailable, you accepted it. When they created distance, you tried to bridge it. Your tolerance taught them their patterns were consequence-free. They could behave however their defensive needs required, and you'd absorb the impact without permanent consequence. But this teaching was harmful to both of you. Harmful to you because you were accepting treatment that damaged you. Harmful to them because they never learned their patterns have costs. Your silence is correction. It's enforcing boundary that communicates. These patterns have permanent consequences. When you reject someone, you lose them. When you're emotionally unavailable, people eventually leave. When your defensive needs override someone else's legitimate relationship needs, the relationship ends and doesn't continue in modified form where you still get benefits. This is a lesson they need to learn. The silence is teaching it in the only way avoidants actually learn, through experiencing the cost of their patterns rather than through words about the cost. They chose to prioritize their defended comfort over your legitimate needs. Experiencing the cost of that choice is appropriate rather than something you should protect them from. At every choice point during relationship, they chose their defensive comfort over your needs. Chose withdrawal over presence. Chose emotional unavailability over the vulnerability your needs required. Chose their patterns over your partnership. These were choices they made. Your silence is a result of accumulated choices they made, and experiencing the result, the loss of you, the absence of your presence, the void where your care used to be, is appropriate consequence that teaches them what their choices actually cost. You're not creating the devastation. You're simply not protecting them from experiencing natural result of their own choices. Throughout relationship, you protected them from consequences by absorbing the impact yourself. But protecting them from consequences prevented them from learning. Now they're learning. The devastation is their education. And while it's painful, it's the pain that comes from finally experiencing the full cost of patterns they've maintained without full accountability. This pain is appropriate. It's the price of the choices they made. You don't need to alleviate it or feel guilty about it. You're simply allowing natural consequences to land where they belong. The silence is what allows you to heal, rather than remaining entangled in their process. Maintaining it is self-protection that honors your needs after a relationship that consistently didn't honor them. Beyond what your silence does to them, the silence serves you. It creates space for your healing, removes the distraction of ongoing contact, prevents you from being pulled back into dynamic that harmed you, allows you to process the relationship and the loss without their presence interfering with your process, protects you from their manipulation or their breadcrumbing or their attempts to keep you engaged while remaining unavailable. The silence is boundary that says, I will not continue to be harmed by this person or this dynamic. I will protect my peace and my healing by removing them completely from my life. This boundary is necessary for your well-being. It's not about punishing them, though them experiencing consequences is appropriate side effect. It's about protecting yourself, about honoring your needs after a relationship where your needs were consistently dishonored, about choosing yourself. The guilt you might feel about their devastation is your empathy being weaponized against your own well-being. Your silence causing them pain doesn't make the silence wrong. It makes it effective boundary that's creating the space you need to heal from what they put you through, what your silence actually accomplishes, and why maintaining it serves both of you long term. Your silence isn't just reactive absence, it's active choice that creates specific outcomes that serve your healing and potentially their growth. Understanding what the silence accomplishes helps you maintain it, despite any guilt or temptation to break it. The silence forces them to sit with their own patterns without your presence, to distract them or absorb the consequences, creating conditions where genuine self-examination might occur. While you were present, while you were engaged, while you were responding to their patterns, they didn't have to fully examine themselves. They could focus on managing you, on your reactions, on the dynamic between you. Your presence was distraction from their internal work. But your silence removes the distraction. Now there's nothing to manage except themselves, nothing to focus on except their own patterns and their own choices and their own responsibility for the outcome. The silence creates conditions where self-examination becomes possible because all external distractions are gone. They're alone with themselves and with recognition of what their patterns cost them. This doesn't guarantee they'll do the examination. Most avoidants don't even when conditions are perfect for it. But the silence creates the possibility. With you present and engaged, there was no possibility. You were buffer between them and themselves. Your silence removes the buffer and forces them to confront themselves without mediation. This is necessary condition for growth, even though it's not sufficient condition. Your silence demonstrates you've genuinely chosen yourself, which is the only stance that might eventually motivate them to do genuine work rather than superficial attempts to restore dynamic. Throughout relationship, they could tell themselves you'd always be available, always accept them back, always tolerate their patterns. This assumption prevented genuine motivation to change, because why change when patterns don't produce permanent consequences? But your silence proves you've genuinely chosen yourself over the relationship. Proves you won't accept them back without genuine transformation. Proves their patterns did produce permanent consequence. This reality, that you're actually gone, actually done, actually choosing yourself, is the only thing that might motivate genuine change. Not superficial change designed to get you back, not temporary adjustment that reverts once you return, but genuine therapeutic work on attachment wounds, because they finally recognize the cost of not doing the work is permanent loss of people who matter. Your silence's message: choose yourself or lose me. And this message, if anything can, might motivate the deep work. If you weren't silent, if you remained engaged, the message would be, you can have both, your patterns and me. That message motivates nothing. Your silence is what creates the possibility of their genuine transformation by making clear the cost of not transforming. The silence protects you from being pulled back into dynamic that harmed you before genuine capacity has been demonstrated. If you weren't silent, if you maintained contact, if you responded to their outreach, you'd be vulnerable to being pulled back into relationship before genuine change has occurred. The avoidant in pain from your silence will say whatever they need to say to restore contact, will promise change, will express insight about patterns, will seem different in moment of crisis. But crisis-driven change rarely sustains. The patterns return once crisis passes, once you're available again, once the pain of your absence is relieved. Your silence protects you from this cycle. It ensures that if they do reach out, if you do eventually respond, it's only after sustained demonstrated change over significant time period. The silence gives you distance to assess whether any change they claim is real transformation or temporary adjustment. It prevents you from accepting promises instead of requiring proof. It protects your heart from being broken again by the same patterns wearing new language. This protection is essential for your healing and for any possibility of functional relationship in future. Your thriving in the silence demonstrates you're better off without them, providing evidence that challenges their narrative about you needing them and validates your choice to leave. The silence creates space for you to thrive, and you're thriving, building your life, healing from the relationship, becoming more yourself, is visible evidence through social media, through mutual friends, through any way they might observe your life, that you're better off without them. This evidence destroys their narrative that you needed them more than they needed you, destroys their assumption that you'd suffer from the ending, proves that the relationship was actually holding you back and that removing yourself from it allowed you to flourish. This proof serves you by validating your choice. Every day you thrive is confirmation that leaving was right decision, and it serves the destruction of their defensive narratives by providing undeniable evidence that those narratives were false. You don't need them. You're not diminished by their absence. You're enhanced by it. This truth, proven through your thriving in your silence, is devastating to their ego, but essential for accurate understanding of what the relationship actually was. The silence creates clean break that allows both of you to move forward, you toward healing and potentially toward relationship with someone capable, them toward either doing genuine work or repeating patterns with someone else. Maintaining contact after relationship ends typically keeps both people stuck, creates false hope, prevents clean grief process, delays actual moving forward. Your silence creates clean break that serves both of you. You can grieve fully, heal completely, move forward genuinely without being pulled back or confused by ongoing contact. You can build new life without them present in any form, and they can, if they choose, do genuine work on themselves without false comfort of your ongoing engagement, or they cannot do the work and repeat patterns with someone else, in which case your silence protected you from wasting more time on someone who won't change. Either way, the clean break the silence creates is what allows genuine forward movement rather than the stuck liminal space ongoing contact would create. The silence is gift to both of you. Even though it doesn't feel like gift to them, it's the only thing that creates conditions where real growth and real moving forward become possible. Why maintaining your silence honors what you deserve and what the relationship actually was. Your silence is not cruelty or punishment. It's appropriate honoring of your worth, an accurate reflection of what the relationship demonstrated about their capacity and your needs. You deserve to be with someone who doesn't need to lose you to recognize your value. Your silence enforces this standard by refusing to accept someone whose recognition came too late. The avoidant may finally recognize your value now that you're gone, may understand what they lost, may want you back now that they appreciate what they had. But you deserve someone who recognized your value while possessing access to you, someone who honored what you offered while you were offering it, someone who didn't need loss to teach them appreciation. Your silence enforces this standard. It says, I will not be with someone whose recognition of my value required my absence. I will not accept someone back whose appreciation came too late. I deserve real-time recognition, not retrospective recognition. This standard is appropriate and healthy. The silence maintains it. Breaking the silence to accept someone whose recognition came after rejection would be accepting less than you deserve. Your silence is self-respect manifest. It's boundary that says, you're worth more than someone who only sees your value after losing you. Your silence reflects the reality that their patterns made relationship impossible. You're simply accepting what they demonstrated rather than hoping for change they haven't proven capable of. Throughout relationship, they demonstrated incapacity, demonstrated they cannot sustain intimacy, cannot maintain consistency, cannot show up vulnerably, cannot meet basic relationship needs. These demonstrations were reality. Your silence simply accepts the reality they showed you. It doesn't hope for potential, doesn't wait for change that hasn't been demonstrated, doesn't believe in transformation that hasn't occurred. It accepts, this is who they are, this is what they're capable of, and what they're capable of is insufficient for my needs. This acceptance through silence is mature response to demonstrated reality. Breaking the silence to give them another chance without demonstrated sustained change would be denying reality in favor of hope. Your silence is acceptance of what is, rather than attachment to what could be. This acceptance is healthy and necessary for your healing. The relationship required you to make yourself smaller. The silence is you reclaiming your full self by refusing to continue accommodating their limitations. Throughout relationship, you accommodated, adjusted your needs, made yourself smaller, accepted less than you deserved, organized yourself around their limitations. This accommodation was slow diminishment of yourself in service of relationship with someone who couldn't meet you fully. Your silence is reclamation. It's you refusing to continue diminishing yourself, refusing to continue accommodating someone who cannot accommodate you, refusing to continue accepting insufficient love while giving full love. The silence says, I will not make myself smaller anymore. I reclaim my full self, my full needs, my full right to receive what I give. This reclamation is essential for your wholeness. Breaking the silence would be returning to accommodation, returning to making yourself smaller, returning to accepting insufficient love. Your silence is you choosing your wholeness over relationship that required your diminishment. This choice honors who you actually are, rather than the smaller version you had to become to fit their limitations. They rejected you, and your silence is simply accepting the rejection completely, rather than fighting against their stated choice. They rejected you. Your silence accepts the rejection, doesn't fight it, doesn't try to convince them to reconsider, doesn't pursue them despite their stated choice. This acceptance is mature response to rejection. They communicated, through words or patterns, that relationship wasn't working for them. Your silence says, I hear you. I accept your choice. I'm moving forward based on what you communicated. This isn't passive victimhood. This is respecting their autonomy while protecting yourself. They made choice. You're accepting it fully rather than trying to override their choice through pursuit or emotional manipulation. Your silence is dignity. It's refusing to beg someone to want you, refusing to fight for someone who rejected you, refusing to convince someone your worth when your worth should be self-evident. The silence is you honoring both their choice and your dignity by accepting that when someone rejects you, the appropriate response is to accept the rejection and move forward, rather than trying to change their mind. Your silence is you building life that doesn't require their transformation, which is the only life that actually serves you, regardless of whether they eventually change. If you maintained contact, if you waited for them, if you oriented yourself around whether they're doing work to change, your life would be organized around their transformation. Your happiness would depend on their growth. Your future would be contingent on their choices. This is giving them enormous power over your life. Your silence is refusal of this arrangement. Your silence says, my life is mine, my happiness is mine, my future is mine. None of it contingent on your transformation or your choices. I'm building life that serves me, whether you change or don't change, whether you do work or don't do work, whether you eventually become capable or remain incapable forever. This independence of your well-being from their transformation is what actually serves you. It's what creates genuine healing and genuine moving forward, rather than suspended waiting for someone else to become different. Your silence creates and protects this independence. Breaking it would reinvest your well-being in their transformation. Maintaining it ensures your life is yours, regardless of what they do with theirs. Your silence after their rejection has destroyed them. Not because you intended destruction, not because you're trying to hurt them, but because silence is natural consequence of rejection they initiated. Because silence removes all the benefits they expected to maintain despite rejecting you. Because silence forces them to experience full weight of their patterns without your presence to buffer the consequences. The silence is devastating to them precisely because it's complete acceptance of their rejection, complete withdrawal of your emotional engagement, complete indifference to whether they matter to you. And this complete absence of you, this void where your presence used to be, is forcing them to confront what they rejected without any validation or distraction to make the confrontation bearable. They're experiencing the silence they subjected you to throughout the relationship. They're feeling the absence they created through their emotional unavailability. They're learning what their patterns cost through experiencing the cost rather than through your words about it. The destruction is their education. The devastation is appropriate consequence, and your silence is self-protection, self-respect, and enforcement of standards that say you deserve real-time recognition of your value, not retrospective recognition that comes too late. Maintain your silence. Let them sit with what they rejected. Let them experience the full weight of their patterns. Let them learn or not learn from the consequences that are finally landing on them rather than on you. And you thrive in the space the silence creates. Build life so extraordinary that whether they're destroyed by your silence or eventually transform becomes completely irrelevant to your well-being. Your silence destroyed them. Your thriving proves you're better off having chosen the silence. That's power. That's freedom. That's what you always deserved.